He interrupted me mid-slide, said I didn't look like someone who closes. By Monday, their entire back-end crashed. Guess who they called first? The conference room was ice cold, not just from the overworked AC, but from the silence that followed his words. He leaned back, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on mine like I was an expense line he couldn't justify. Around the table, partners shifted in their seats, uncomfortable not because of the numbers, but because I wasn't who they expected. I had built the backbone of that solution. Weeks of 4 a.m. log checks, 2 failed prototypes, and a last-minute architecture overhaul that saved 20% in overhead. But to him, I was just a she with a nice deck. The room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and polished ego. My palms were dry. I had trained for this pitch for 3 days straight. No fluff, all signal. A $70 million opportunity wrapped in clean code and bulletproof integrations. I made it to slide 4. Then he cut in. We need someone who can sell this. Not understand it, not build it, sell it. I glanced at the CTO, who avoided my gaze. We had shared whiteboards, 2 AM debugs, a hallway burger once when we both missed dinner. He knew I was the pitch. I think we're done, the man said. And just like that, I stood, picked up my laptop, walked out. Behind me, I heard one of the junior partners whisper, "Did she just leave?" I didn't even flinch. 2 days later, the CTO emailed me directly. Subject: Need your eyes on something urgent. Attached was a screenshot. Their middleware had failed in prod. The logs were a bloodbath. I could have left it unread. But I didn't. Every 2 to 3 minutes that morning, another Slack ping. Can you confirm what version this was built on? No one can find the failover script. Did you set up the HA policy, or was that in dev? They were unraveling because I wasn't just the person presenting the deck. I was the one who made sure the deck worked in the first place. Later that week, the CTO sent the letter. I didn't ask him to. I didn't reply. But I read it more than once. Without her, nothing works. And underneath, scrawled in his signature blue pen, she's not a presenter, she's the foundation. The man who cut me off never reached out. But the silence from his side was almost poetic. The week after the collapse, my phone barely stayed silent for an hour. Not from him. Never from him. But clients I'd touched, systems I'd tuned, people I didn't even know remembered my name. They were all suddenly just checking in. The CTO's letter had done something odd. It had leaked, not through some public post or press release, but in those hush-hush channels where engineers, project leads, and mid-level directors whisper the real truth about who runs what. I heard it got shared in a Signal group titled Damage Control. I wasn't in that group, but I was now their myth. Every 2 or 3 paragraphs someone would write, "Is she available?" I heard she ghost wrote the stability layer for the Orion integration. She never even took credit for the load balancing rewrite. The legend grew faster than I could stop it, and part of me, a part I'd buried under layers of protocol and polite nods in boardrooms, didn't want to stop it. Meanwhile, the man, let's call him Douglas, since his LinkedIn endorsement said he thrived in pressure-led closing environments, was busy hunting for a replacement deal. The $70 million memo was in limbo. Legal was circling. Procurement was nervous. They wanted confidence. But confidence doesn't reboot a corrupted database at 3 a.m. Microstorm, the client's back-end system, was mine. My fingerprints were everywhere. I'd named variables with puns, left little Easter eggs in comment blocks, built it to run lean on underfunded infrastructure and still scale like a beast. When it failed, it didn't just stall revenue. It unmasked the illusion that any of this ran without me. Zoom calls were tense. I was invited back by the team, not the board. I joined one under a pseudonym, watched the chaos, heard Douglas speak with that too smooth tone he reserved for people he thought didn't matter. Someone finally said it. Did we burn the only person who knew how this whole thing was held together? Silence. Then the CTO voice clipped. Yes. That's when I knew. I wasn't going to ask for anything. I didn't need to. I was already the shadow holding up the ceiling. And soon, everyone would realize that walking out of that pitch wasn't my downfall. It was my pivot. She walked out of a $70 million room and still ended up in control. What happens when the world realizes she doesn't need the deal? The deal needs her, enjoying the quiet revenge unfolding. Stick around. Her silence speaks louder than his millions. Share your favorite moment so far. What would you have done after that pitch? Hit follow, because the foundation is only just beginning to shake the tower. It started with a calendar invite, no sender, no subject. Just a time, Monday, 9 a.m., and a location, Client HQ, 14th floor. Glass room. I hovered over it. The invite had no metadata, no creator, but I knew exactly who had sent it, the CTO. He didn't call, didn't email, just that blank invite like a chess player moving a pawn and daring me to notice. I didn't RSVP, but I showed up. The building had changed, or maybe I had. What once felt intimidating, towering marble, aggressive symmetry, men in suits with nowhere to be but everywhere to impose, now just looked hollow. A theater for power. A stage for people like Douglas to pretend they owned the script. When I stepped off the elevator, the receptionist blinked in recognition. I thought, she started, then caught herself. The CTO's waiting. Of course he was. Inside the glass room, the one used for sensitive negotiations, he sat alone. No slides, no counsel, no posturing, just a document in front of him. He looked up. Thanks for coming. I said nothing. He slid the document forward. A restructured deal memo. New terms, clear attribution. My name listed twice, once as the lead architect, once as technical continuity partner. I flipped through, not fast, not slow, enough to let him wonder. I had to fight for this, he said. You know how they are. I did. But I also knew this wasn't a favor. Their system had bled too long, too visibly. Douglas had tried to bring in consultants. One crashed prod again. Another misspoke in a client call and exposed a security hole I'd silently patched months ago. The board had noticed. Reputation was on the line. You'll report directly to me, he added. We'll route around. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Douglas was being sidelined. I looked up, finally spoke. You're not doing this because it's right. You're doing it because it's necessary. He nodded. I can live with that, I said. And signed. Not for the $70 million, not for redemption, but for control. This time, the architecture wouldn't just live in the code. It would live in the terms, in the hierarchy, in me. The first meeting under the new terms was a Zoom call. Not a boardroom, not a handshake session. Just a screen, 6 faces, and the silent recalibration of power. Douglas was there. Demoted in title, demoted in energy. His video was on, but his eyes kept flicking off camera, like someone waiting to be rescued from a bad decision. I was introduced last, not as tech support, not as advisor, but as the person defining the next phase. The CTO opened with a summary of what had gone wrong. Then he turned to me. She'll walk you through what's next. I did. I laid out a 3-phase rebuild with hard deadlines and non-negotiable architecture principles. I spoke without fillers, without the need to prove, because now everyone already knew. Every 2 to 3 minutes, someone took notes faster. Someone nodded a beat too eagerly. Someone finally started listening. One of the newer VPs tried to assert dominance with a quick question about budget reallocation. I didn't flinch. No budget yet. First, we stabilize. You can't scale chaos. No one pushed back. After the call, I got an email. Subject: "You've got fans." From a senior compliance lead I'd never met. Body: "First time I've seen them quiet in months." Then another email, then Slack messages, then a Teams ping from a director on a parallel project. They wanted more. Not my code, not my documentation, me. Because, for the first time, the foundation wasn't invisible. It spoke, and people leaned in. She became the person execs whisper about in side chats. The question now isn't if she'll lead the rebuild, it's how far she'll let them follow. The rebuild began in silence. No kickoff party, no all hands with branded mugs and fake smiles. Just a line of code at 6:47 a.m. and a Slack message. Phase 1, start clean, no shortcuts, no ghosts. I didn't wait for approvals. I was the approval. The first thing I did was rip out the Band-Aids, the legacy patches they'd duct-taped onto Microstorm in the hope that no one would notice the rot underneath. Their old system was a Frankenstein. Third-party tools barely held together, deprecated libraries duct-taped with hope, and a CI/CD pipeline that ran like a drunk octopus on roller skates. Every 2 to 3 hours, someone tried to sneak in a small fix. "No," I replied, "every time. Small fixes are how it broke in the first place." Douglas, he stayed out of my way. He'd been given a strategic partner oversight title, which in corporate speak meant stay visible but irrelevant. But I saw him watching, always joining late, always camera off, always logging every change I made. I let him, because control isn't about blocking people. It's about making them realize they no longer matter. By the end of week 2, something changed. A junior engineer, Clara, I think, stayed late in the repo logs. She DM'd me. "The new modules are elegant." Are we allowed to say that? I laughed for the first time in weeks. "Yes, Clara. Let's build something that doesn't just work. Let's make it beautiful." And we did. The new stack was lean, fast, and almost poetic. Variable names like whispers, functions that read like intentions, an architecture that didn't shout, but sang. When the first internal demo hit, the CTO messaged me privately. "You turned our monster into a machine." I wrote back, "No, I turned your machine into a system. Next, we make it human." That was the goal all along. Not revenge, resonance, to leave behind something that couldn't be ignored, not because it crashed loudly, but because it ran so quietly well no one dared touch it. The system was humming, no more fire drills, no more midnight urgent tags. Just the calm rhythm of clean deployments and engineering chats that didn't start with panic. But that peace came with attention, the kind that coils beneath still water. Because now people had time to wonder, why had the system failed so badly in the first place? Why had someone like me, who held it together so invisibly, been pushed out in the first place? And who had let that happen? The whisper network turned louder. During a Zoom sync with external vendors, one asked offhandedly, "Is it true she wasn't even invited to the original architecture review?" The room fell weirdly quiet. Someone coughed. The CTO deflected, but the question stuck like a sliver. Every 2 to 3 Slack threads, someone would tag me instead of the team. "Can we just check with her? She'll know. She was there from the start, right?" I said nothing, because some fires burn cleaner when left to the oxygen of guilt. Douglas tried to reclaim some ground. He sent out a slide deck one morning titled, "Reframing the Roadmap, Strategic Leadership in Phase 2. Buzzwords, pivot jargon, and a subtle erasure of everything we'd built. But he made one mistake. He reused an old flowchart, one I'd created in a forgotten Figma file. He didn't even bother to change the font. Within minutes, Clara pinged me. Did he just copy your diagram? I checked, confirmed, then said, let him present it. Because you don't argue with someone trying to claim your shadow. You wait until they walk into the light and reveal they have nothing of their own. The next meeting, I watched him pitch it, confident, polished, until the CTO interrupted. Didn't she design this back in March? Douglas blinked, stammered, the kind of pause that rewrites reputations. After the call, he sent me a message, no apology, just, let's find a way to align moving forward. I didn't reply, because you don't align with the past, you replace it. There was an old whiteboard in the corner of the office, the kind no one used anymore. Stained with ghost marker ink and forgotten diagrams, it had survived 3 remodels and at least 1 departmental reorg. One afternoon, I wiped it clean. I wasn't planning to. I just did. Picked up the black marker, drew a circle, then a spine, then branches, a system map, not of infrastructure, of people. I plotted roles, not titles, energy, not headcount, influence, not hierarchy. Every 2 or 3 lines I paused, not to think, but to listen, to what the building had been trying to say, to who actually made things work and who merely repeated agendas. Names emerged: Clara, Yun, Ibrahim, who still hadn't gotten proper credit for that auto-scaling module. There were people here who had always known the truth, that the magic wasn't in the headline presentations or the strategic memos, but in the people who stayed late without being asked, who covered production silently, who made the system breathe. And now I had the leverage to bring them forward. I called a quiet meeting, no subject, no agenda. But they came. One by one, they entered the side conference room. No status reports, no performance reviews, just the whiteboard. They saw their names, they saw the lines, they saw themselves, not as replaceable functions, but as the structure we were going to build around. I stood back, let it settle. Then I said, we're not here to protect the system anymore. We're here to design one that doesn't need protection. Clara looked at me, wide-eyed. Are we allowed to do that? I smiled. We're not asking. That was the shift, from repair mode to design, from fear to intent. Because once the foundation is visible, you don't just hold the house, you redraw the blueprint. It was the first time in months that the boardroom filled without tension, no last-minute tech issues, no missing links, just quiet chairs, open laptops, and eyes that didn't dart nervously to the clock. This wasn't a crisis sync. This was a presentation. Only this time, I wasn't the one cut off mid-slide. I was the one everyone waited on. Douglas sat in the back, muted, camera on, eyes down. He'd become a ghost, still on payroll, still involved, but stripped of narrative, reassigned to external innovation scouting, which sounded important, but meant exile. Every 2 to 3 slides I paused, not for questions, but for silence. Silence is where power breathes. The new system was live. Uptime at 99.99%. Deployments down from 43 steps to 7. Latency? Cut in half. And the architecture? Documented, modular, human-readable. Beautiful in the way only functional clarity can be. I gave credit by name. Ibrahim for the fail-over logic. Yun for the monitoring dashboards. Clara, not just for her code, but for standing up and saying what no one else dared. The CTO watched, arms folded, not with suspicion this time, but with something closer to relief. When I closed the deck, no one spoke at first. Then, a slow clap, not sarcastic, Not performative, just earned. One of the legal directors said, "You've done more in 10 weeks than we managed in 2 years." Another added, "Why weren't you leading this from the beginning?" I didn't answer. Because everyone already knew. As the room emptied, the CTO lingered. He looked at me like he wanted to say something meaningful, but all he said was, "Lunch? My treat." I smiled politely. I brought my own. Because I no longer needed invitations. I wasn't hungry for validation. I was already full, with clarity, ownership, and something rarer than either in tech: respect without noise. It came quietly, like most real power does. No announcement, no title change, just a line in a company-wide update. All future technical architecture decisions will route through the continuity office, under her supervision. No one needed clarification. Everyone knew what that meant. I didn't ask for the role, didn't negotiate it in a room with lawyers and lattes. It happened because people followed, even when they weren't told to. Even Douglas, in his own way, acknowledged it. He forwarded a vendor summary with a single line. "Assume she signs off." Every 2 to 3 requests that crossed my inbox now ended with, "Do you agree with this direction? What would you do? We'll wait for your green light." The transformation was complete, not just in the system, but in them. The fear had receded, and, in its place, structure, intention, and something dangerously close to culture. Clara got promoted. Ibrahim was finally listed as lead on a cross-team spec. Yun presented at the next industry panel. And people took notes. And me? I stayed in the background when I could, because foundations don't shout, they hold. One afternoon, I passed the old glass room. The lights were off. The chairs were empty. A thin layer of dust shimmered on the table. I didn't stop, didn't look inside, because I was done trying to prove I belonged there. I'd built something better, something that didn't need tinted windows and leather chairs to validate its worth. Something invisible, but undeniable. It ended not with applause, but with absence. No more frantic pings at midnight. No passive-aggressive threads trying to mask blame as alignment. No meetings that could have been emails or performances. Just rhythm, the kind of quiet that only comes when systems breathe without help. I looked over the final logs of the quarter. 0 escalations. Deployment cycles now under 24 hours. Team morale? Off the charts. And not because of free snacks, but because they were seen. Because the people who once carried the company in silence were now named, credited, and trusted. Every 2 to 3 metrics I scanned, a memory flashed. The night Clara rewrote that dependency by hand. The moment Ibrahim stayed after hours to catch a race condition that never even made it into a bug report. The time Yun risked calling out a flaw in the plan, not to shame it, but to strengthen it. These weren't teammates anymore. They were architects of something clean. And me? I sat by the window that overlooked the city, the same city that once made me feel small. I remembered walking out of that pitch, the sharp click of my heels on marble, the way no one called after me, the echo of not fitting. But now I understood. I was never meant to fit into that room. I was meant to redefine the frame. A final message blinked on my screen. Just wanted to say thank you. You made us believe again. No signature, didn't need one. I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked into a future I didn't need to pitch to anyone. It already existed, and I had built it. From the silence. Up.